llorona, llorona, cuando al pasar yo te vi. Salías de un templo un día, llorona, cuando al pasar yo te vi. Hermoso huipil llevabas, llorona, que en la Virgen te creí. Hermoso huipil llevabas, llorona, que en la Virgen te creí. Ay de mí, llorona, llorona, llorona de un campo lirio. Ay de mi llorona, llorona, llorona de un campo lirio. El que no sabe de amores, llorona, no sabe lo que es martirio. El que no sabe de amores, llorona, no sabe lo que es martirio. Flores, llorona, las flores de un campo santo. No sé qué tienen las flores, llorona, las flores de un campo santo, que cuando las mueve el viento, llorona, parece que está llorando. Que cuando las mueve el viento, llorona, parece que están llorando. Ay de mí, llorona, 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 llévame al río. Ay de mí, llorona, 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 llévame al río. Tápame con tu rebozo, llorona, porque me muero de frío. Tápame con tu rebozo, llorona, porque me muero de frío.
pude haber yo hecho más por ti. Oscura soledad estoy viviendo, la misma soledad de tu sepulcro. Tú eres el amor del cual yo tengo, el más triste recuerdo de Acapulco. Como quisiera, ay, que tú vivieras, que tus ojitos jamás se hubieran cerrado nunca y estar mirándolos, amores
Our reading today is from the book of Ecclesiastes 7:2-3. Hear what God's Spirit is saying to you. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting, for this is the end of everyone, and the living will lay it to heart. Sorrow is better than laughter, for by sadness of countenance the heart is made glad. Mejor es ir a una casa de luto que ir a una casa de banquete, porque aquello es el fin de todo hombre, y al que vive lo hará reflexionar en su corazón. Mejor es la tristeza que la risa, porque cuando el rostro está triste, el corazón puede estar contento. Here ends the reading of words that give us insight on God. May God grant to us wisdom and courage for interpretation.
So, as most of you know, I am associate minister here at University Christian Church. And you know, because I say this all the time, I love my job here and I love this church. A big part of my work is the pastoral care. So I listen as people have needs and pain and things that they need to share and just kind of sort through. And I walk alongside those who are grieving and hurting. I also officiate the memorials and most of the funerals here at University Christian Church. It's a real privilege to be able to walk alongside people during this time of planning. And when you're planning a funeral, it's usually pretty recently after the person has passed, and it's a really heavy thing to go through and walk through, but I consider it a huge privilege. I have had to plan funerals and memorials for people that I know and love and really care about here at this church. And I even recently, some of you might remember 2 years ago, planned the funeral for one of my lifelong best friends, which this church hosted, and I really appreciated. And that was one of the hardest things I had to do in my life. But it's also a very beautiful thing, because I get to hear the stories about the people who have died. I get to hear memories and moments about their lives as these people are planning. And it's something kind of magical, because sometimes in the conversation, there's often this brief moment where the memories overwhelm the sense of sadness. And it's almost like their loved one for a quick moment is still here, and we feel that presence of that person. And it's really beautiful. And this is probably one of the big reasons why I love Dia de los Muertos. And I think there's a lot to gain from my culture's celebration of death. So to fully understand the meaning of the celebration, one must understand its roots. Cultures thousands of years ago believed that the dead weren't truly gone. They were merely living out what comes next. And we see this time and time again in Egyptian culture and like these ancient civilizations. And the Aztecs of over 4,000 years ago are no exception. They summoned their dead with things that they would need in the afterlife. So some of the story goes that there were 2 rulers over the land of the dead, Mictecacíhuatl and her husband, Mictecacíhuatli. So the Aztecs honored together they ruled the 9 levels of the dead and underworld. The Aztecs honored their dead and would celebrate once a year by providing them with supplies that they would use in the underworld, such as food and things, that we asked you to share with us today as well. In time, when the Aztecs were colonized by the Spanish and the French invaders, the celebration was then moved to coincide with the Catholic celebration of All Saints' Day. and it was adapted by the Catholics into what was deemed a more appropriate celebration. But don't be fooled, Dia de los Muertos does not have its roots in Catholicism. It has its roots in an ancient civilization of the Aztecs. So much of the meaning of this Aztec belief has probably been lost over time and through the colonization of a culture and a people. And yet there is such powerful, present, resonant truth in this holy day that rises from those beliefs. Similar to ancient cultures, today we are still no closer to better understanding death and what comes after. It still remains a mystery to us just as much as it did to the Egyptians and the Aztecs. Long after the Aztecs and Mayas celebrated their dead, long after the pyramids in Egypt were built and their dead were mummified, thousands of years after the terracotta warriors and chariots were buried alongside the Chinese emperor, we still honor our dead with fancy coffins, decorative urns, and elaborate rituals. And even with all that we do, death is a mystery. But just because it's a mystery doesn't mean that we should fear death. One thing remains clear to each of us. We will have a date and time in which our own human life will end. We will all die, and we cannot predict that moment. Dia de los Muertos is a day to look death in the face and acknowledge that death is holding each and every one of us by the hand and that life is brief. My culture, whose cultural ancestry is rooted in the traditions of the Aztec and Maya, has created a way to live in acceptance with death, to see and understand death as it is, inevitable. The Dia de los Muertos activities usually consist of families visiting the graves of their loved ones, and at the grave sites, family members engage in decorating them with flowers, setting out and enjoying a picnic, and interacting socially with other family and community members who gather at the cemetery. Families remember the departed by telling stories about them. They bring toys for deceased children and food and beverages for their dead. They sit on picnic blankets next to grave sites, eat their favorite foods, and many spend the day and even all night in the cemetery. They also build altars in their homes, similar to the one that we have here, dedicating them to their dead. They surround these altars with flowers, food, and pictures of the deceased. They light candles and place them next to the altar. They honor the dead by playing their favorite music and preparing their favorite foods. And all of these little acts express a sense of continuity with those who have passed away, as if to say that they remain united at one with them, even though they're separated by death. And it's not a morbid occasion, but it is an almost very festive time. It represents the spiritual bridge which exists between the world of the living and the world of the dead. This holiday reminds us that two things can exist at once: grief and sadness and mourning, and at the same time, happiness and joy when thinking about the memories of a loved one and our time together with them. The grave becomes a place people visit, decorate, and tend so that there is a sign of those who came before for future generations to remember and feel a connection with. But it's more than just that. The figure of the Catrina, the skeleton woman with the big hat that is so typical that you see during Dia de los Muertos, and all the other skeletal figures that confront us on Dia de los Muertos, reminds us that there is a skeleton in each and every one of us. Beneath our own skin and muscle, there is a skeleton. We have a skull. And the skulls we see on the altars, you might see a few that we placed on there, aren't just plain white skulls. They are decoratively and elaborately painted, such as my face right now, making death less frightening and even beautiful and ornate. And rather than taking the symbols of death and fearing them, we embrace them so they become less frightening, and it helps our life become more vibrant. It's a reminder to live fully now. And we can see that in the scripture verse in Ecclesiastes I was going to call you Sylvia. That's her daughter's name. Liz just read a few minutes ago. It is better to go to the house of mourning than to go to the house of feasting. At first glance, it appears that the author has a preference for mourning. It's better to mourn than to feast. And he might be deterring us from celebration, joy, and mirth. However, this is the author of Ecclesiastes, where in 2:24, he says, "There's nothing better for human beings than to eat, drink, and experience pleasure in their hard work." I also saw that this is from God's hand. So which one is it? Is it better to mourn or to celebrate? Well, this is the author of Ecclesiastes, where we hear there is a time for every season, right? There is a time for all of these things. So it can be both. The scripture fully acknowledges that it is important to grieve death. And the Jewish culture of the time had actually a quite very long process of mourning their dead, with rituals that often extended for weeks. Well into Jesus' time on earth, we see that there were extended duties for honoring the dead. We see this clearly when Mary and the women go to the tomb to anoint Jesus' body. These rituals help them understand death. It helped them grow in sympathy, and in many ways prepared each and every one of them for what was inevitably going to happen to them, their own death. And it is through confronting death and mourning that one can actually more fully experience the pleasures of life if we allow ourselves to. The author of Ecclesiastes understood this. Mourning and celebration. There is a time for each. And each experience can help us better experience death and life. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who is known for developing the 5 stages of grief, I absolutely love her. She's an expert on death and dying and has helped us truly understand the experiences surrounding death and dying. She says something very similar to this author in Ecclesiastes. She says, "It's only when we truly know and understand that we have a limited time on earth and we have no way of knowing when our time is up, we will then begin to live each day to the fullest, as if it was the only one we had." Acknowledging death can help us live each day to the fullest. Kubler-Ross also said, "Dying is nothing to fear. It can be the most wonderful experience of your life. It all depends on how you lived." So when our own time comes, we hope that the best parts of us will be carried on in the lives of those that remain and come after us. But that all depends on how we live our life. We can live our lives through acts of selfishness and callousness, or we can live our life through kindness, generosity, and decency. And how we act and react has a chain effect. Our rudeness certainly affects those around us and the people we're treating unkindly in the same way that our kindness does. So how are we living our lives here today while we still can? These celebrations of rituals of death, many that have existed since the beginning of time and throughout the rise and fall of civilizations, help us live beyond the pain and the loss and the fear of death. Dia de los Muertos honors those whom we have lost. It moves us beyond our grief into a place of remembrance and love. The pain might still be there. We can feel that, But we don't get stuck in that pain because we are reminded that death is also coming for us. So let's live our life to the fullest while we still can. This special holiday reminds us that we are one with those who came before us. They are with us in our breath, in the wind, in the water, the light of this earth. And we are also one with those who come after us. As the author of Ecclesiastes and my Mexican culture reminds us, when we sit with death, we can become more accustomed to it, fearing this mystery far less. As we enjoy time with our loved ones and sing together, feast together, and celebrate together, we can feel one another more tenderly. We can feel our connection and the energy of life flowing from Creator God as it moves through us. And if we listen closely, we can listen to how our departed loved ones call us more fully into this life. Let's allow ourselves to fully surrender both to the mystery of death and the beauty of this life. Let it be so.